It has been said that lawyers do not enjoy a great reputation. Well, we're going to talk about that with a very prominent lawyer today, right here on Due Process.
Major funding for Due Process is provided by Meade Lexus of Southfield and Meade Lexus of Lakeside, offering a large selection of new and pre-owned certified premium vehicles.
What if your car didn't come from a factory, but out in the world where you actually drive? You can find out at lexus.com/allnewrx.
And by WWJ News Radio 950, keeping you up to date with the latest news, traffic, weather, sports, and business information 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Thank you. I'm Henry Baskin. I'm your host for this edition of Due Process. Today we're going to talk to a gentleman named David Mendelson. David Mendelson is a lawyer who practices primarily in the metropolitan area, but he'll tell you stories about how he's gone far and wide to practice law. David, welcome to Due Process.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me back.
David, you heard me say, yeah, right, you have been on before.
I have been on before, yes.
You heard me say at the beginning that lawyers do not enjoy a great reputation, and frequently they misquote Shakespeare and all that kind of stuff. What is it about our profession that causes people to say, I don't like lawyers, I don't like used car salesmen, and so forth and so on?
Well, I think that's a great question. People, when they come to lawyers, they already have a problem, and they're coming to you to try to fix it.
Right.
98% of all lawyers out there do their absolute best to fix the problem. 2%, or some small percentage, see that problem as an opportunity to do something good for themselves. That's no different than any other profession out there, but because lawyers are dealing with such personal matters, such personal issues for these folks, when a lawyer takes advantage of someone, it has ramifications throughout their whole life. And I think that's why we get such a bad reputation.
It's sort of strange. Like you take a physician, for example. I don't like lawyers. I don't like lawyers. I don't like lawyers because they sue doctors. Okay?
Right.
And then the doctor gets sued, and suddenly his best friend is a lawyer.
First person you call when you're in trouble is your lawyer.
Right. So it doesn't make sense when Shakespeare, when they were trying to pull off some anarchy in some country that Shakespeare was writing about, the guy said the first thing we have to do in order to be successful is get rid of the lawyers.
Right.
Which now they interpret that to say, oh, we got to get rid of the lawyers first. They had to get rid of the lawyers because they couldn't have law governing their actions.
That's right.
So
lawyers are a check on almost every abuse that happens in our country. We have seatbelts in our cars because of lawyers. Seatbelts developed into airbags because of lawyers. Some of these common things that we see all come out of lawsuits and things that lawyers have driven companies to do better and be better.
Right, and it all serves the general public.
Absolutely.
But ultimately, it's not the lawyer that gets the credit, it's the car company that gets the credit.
Absolutely.
But it's okay, well, we can live with that.
Yes. As
long as good comes out of it. Now, you, in your travels, you practice in the metropolitan area.
Yes.
But you also, and I know, have occasion to have gone to California, to Washington, D.C., to Florida, where you're also licensed.
Right.
New York City, and West Branch, Michigan, by way of example, or Charlevoix County. How are you perceived as an individual lawyer? How do you walk into a courtroom knowing that all these lawyers have seen or know the judge before you got there?
I haven't had a problem with that, and I think that's for two reasons. First of all, you have to let the judge know that you're prepared. And no matter what courtroom you go into, a judge appreciates a lawyer that comes in and is well prepared to do whatever needs to be done that day. I think the second thing that I've been successful with, and a lot other lawyers I think as well, you need to let the judge know that you're honest. The judge asks you a question, you give the judge an honest answer, you're going to instantly gain credibility with that judge, and that hometown advantage goes away.
Right, and even if that answer is not the answer you would like to have had.
Absolutely.
I mean, you tell the truth, you're candid, and most judges respect that.
Absolutely.
You know, there was just to highlight something about how you and other lawyers practice. People see the results in the paper. It's a headline. in a case you had, the largest verdict in the state of Michigan, jury verdict, $337 million.
Right.
Okay, now people think two things. A, you're getting a percentage of it,
Right.
which is not true. And B, it was like, okay, we had a trial. But tell us about those kinds of cases.
The trial's the culmination. It's almost the fun part for the lawyers. I don't know how fun it is for the clients, but it's the fun part for the lawyers for years and years of hard work. You know, that particular case.
That's where the stimulus, I just want to not digress, but the stimulus is it's a high energy stimulus as opposed to flying an airplane for 5 hours over Minneapolis, which is a low energy stimuli.
Well, hopefully, you know, I don't forget to give my closing argument and be an hour and a half late.
No, but I mean it's a very stimulating thing.
It is. It's if you grew up in competition or you played sports, it's very similar to the game.
Right.
You have your practice all week, which is tough and difficult.
But then you have 60 minutes.
But you have 60 minutes of your game on Sunday.
But David, and once again, not to digress, it's not CSI. It's not Law and Order. I mean, people think it's like from start to finish, bam, it's in an hour, and people get impatient. They say, "What's taking so long?"
It's actually more difficult to try cases now than I think it was years ago because of the television and the internet, and people's attention spans are broken down into very short segments of time. And you have to, I think, adjust your trial skills to give them
the jury
to give the jury short snippets at a time so that they can focus on what you're trying to do.
Tell us about how you do a major case, because the headline doesn't tell it.
Well, every case has discovery, and discovery is you believe something has happened, and as a result you file a complaint. Your job as a lawyer is to go out and find the truth. Find the truth about whether what you believed is accurate or not. And you do that through a process called discovery. And that involves you getting documents or receiving documents from the other side, and you producing documents that
What kind of documents?
Emails, contracts, and emails are a big issue these days, as you can imagine, with the amount of electronic storage that companies have now. Contracts, hard copy files, any document you can find, you can have access to if it has some bearing on your case.
Okay, so give me an example of like how many documents are produced by the opposition in a case that you may try.
In a fairly large commercial case now, you're talking multiple million pages of documents.
3 million, 4 million?
10 million, 12 million.
Okay, you got 10 million pieces of paper.
Yes.
Some are long, some are short. How do you have the time to be able to read 6 million or 4 million documents?
Well, you can't. One individual can't read 5 million pages of documents. So you have folks that work on your team with you. You search electronically for keywords that might be important to your case. And that takes that collection of 6 million pages or 10 million pages down to still a large number, but maybe 500,000.
Okay, well, for example, let's take an individual who doesn't have a company that he represents. It's just an individual. Guy was injured in a trucking accident. He wants to get all the records of all the modifications made to that truck and all the upgrades and all the changes that were made from the day the truck was first created. So he does what you suggest. He sends out notices and he gets back 6 million pieces of paper. How lawyers can't afford to do that, can they?
Well, they can't, and that's why I think it depends upon the size of your case. If you have a case where your top value of recovery is, let's say, $50,000, you're not going to ask for that type of documentation because you would spend more money reviewing the pages than you would potentially recover.
So big companies have a distinct advantage over individuals, obviously.
Well, I don't know that it's a distinct advantage. If it just individuals, if their case is large enough, well, it will justify spending the money to review 6 or 10 or 12 million pages worth of documents. But if an individual has a small case, it just doesn't justify it for them.
Isn't this sort of a new law that the electronic communications have to be maintained?
There is. There have been changes because in years past, people sent letters and you'd mark them received and you'd stick them in a hard copy file. And
Right.
if you ever got sued, you'd get a request for the Jones file and you'd go to your file cabinet, you'd pull it out and you'd copy it and produce it.
Okay.
Now, emails, and even when you delete emails, they're still in your system somewhere.
Can't ever get rid of them.
You can't get rid of them completely. And so the courts are struggling and the lawyers are struggling with exactly the problem that you raised, which is how do I deal with getting 6 million pages when I don't even want them?
Let's send a message to the people who are watching this show and make them understand if they create an email and they say something about the other person or something, that email could be part of the record in the case.
Absolutely, whether it's deleted or not.
Right, and people are really not even paying attention to it. And I'll see emails come across and say highly confidential. It doesn't matter if it's confidential, or it doesn't matter if it says for your eyes only.
If it's relevant to the case, it's going to be produced.
Right. So the word to people should be that, hey, be careful of what you put on your email.
Quite frankly, Henry, I think it's beyond just the legal field that people need to be careful. You see all these kids now with their Facebooks,
Right.
and they're putting pictures on the internet, and those things are there forever. I hear stories now of employers who are, for prospective new clients or new hires, are looking for their Facebook pages to see what's on there.
Really?
Yes.
So something you put on in college.
Something you put on in college. If you had a wild party in college and you put a couple pictures on your Facebook and your prospective employer looks at that and says, I'm not sure I want that person.
You can't get rid of that?
I don't know if you can get rid of it or not, but I know it's out there for some people to find. People more computer savvy than me can probably find it.
So, David, when you travel, Chicago, New York, whatever it is, or Washington, D.C., what is your best experience having traveled to these places or living in Florida?
Oh, gosh. I think the best experience in general is you meet so many new and different people from different walks of life, different cultures. You go down to Texas, they do things a little bit differently than they do in California or New York. And I've enjoyed traveling around the country. I think it's been fabulous.
When you go to New York, do the New York lawyers think that they're smarter than the Detroit lawyers?
Well,
and they mispronounce Detroit all the time.
Well, Detroit has a bad rap around the country. And one of the ways I think to deal with that is Detroit has so many wonderful things to offer. And every time someone says something bad about Detroit, I just remind them about something good that Detroit has to offer. And I know we're struggling, and I know our city's struggling, and our state's struggling, but there's still so many wonderful things to offer that I'm certain to make sure I tout Detroit as opposed to let them bash our city any more than they do.
Yeah, but intellectually, don't they feel, because they've gone to Eastern schools and Harvard and all that stuff, and they have a New York accent?
There are some that do, and it's whether it's New York or Miami. When I practiced down in Florida, the Miami lawyers sometimes had that an attitude towards them as well. And I'm perfectly happy with the other lawyer thinking he's smarter than I am or she's smarter than I am, because it works to your advantage at some point.
Well, I mean, you had a case up northern Michigan, where you decided that you're going to play it a little differently. We're going to go to a break now. We'll talk about that when we come back.
Very good.
Stay with us. We'll be right back here on Due Process.
Legal referrals and more information on this and other related topics are available on our website at www.dueprocess.tv. There you'll find information on today's program, helpful hints to legal issues, support materials, and lawyer referrals. You can also stream previous episodes of Due Process.
Thank you. I'm Henry Baskin, back with David Mendelson. David, at the break we were talking about you trying a case in West Branch, Michigan.
Yes.
Tell us, what did you do to prepare yourself for that?
Well, any place that you go, you have to do your best to fit in. And West Branch was probably a little more rural than
well, yeah,
where I normally practice here in the metropolitan Detroit area. And I actually had somewhere to go the night before, and I stopped off at, I think, a Walmart to get a pair of jeans because I didn't have any.
Yeah.
And I was going out that night, and I'd forgotten to pack some jeans. And the next morning, the court clerk asked me if I enjoyed my trip to Walmart, because it was such a small town.
How did the jeans fit?
Yeah, how did the jeans fit? It was such a small town. And so you just have to fit in, and you have to change your approach a little bit. You can't show up with a a nice expensive suit to a more rural jurisdiction. You can't change who you are, but you still have to try to fit in as best as you can.
Right, but you know that if you're driving a Ferrari, which you don't, but you don't drive it up to these towns and park it in front of the courthouse.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, like I said, you can't change who you are, and people that try to change who they are probably come off looking like they're trying too hard. But it's almost out of respect for the jurisdiction that you're in, and you do your best to fit in with who they are and what they do and follow their customs and traditions. And every court I've been in has different ones.
Well, I have a feeling because I think at first the judge may look at you skeptically and say, what are you doing in California? Because we have lawyers in California. What are you doing here? But after a while, I believe that the judge's attitude changes, not by design, but he just forgets because you become a lawyer, right?
I think most judges, and judges are people too, but I think for the most part, judges do their best to get it right. And as a result, if I'm right on that, and I think I am, they forget that you're from Michigan when you're in California trying a case because they're just trying to get it right. And if you have the right side of the law and the right side of the facts, ultimately that's what should carry the day. And I really believe that in my heart, I think that you can't be a lawyer and do your job unless you believe that they do try their best to get it right.
Well, you would then say that lawyers in the state of Michigan are equal to or better, if not better, or they're at least equal to lawyers in any other state.
Absolutely, without any hesitation whatsoever.
Right.
Without any hesitation. And I think one of the things that I think frustrates me and other folks that practice law around here is that when some companies get a big case around here, they want to go get the New York firm because there's this perception that the New York lawyers are better, as you were talking about earlier. And you have to fight against that. And there are so many talented lawyers in this state that the work should stay here because we're more than capable.
Well, no question about it. Didn't you have dinner one night in Washington where lawyers were charging $950 an hour?
Yeah, I think one of them had a comma in his hourly rate. It crossed over the $1,000 barrier, exactly. And the rates here are not nearly as high, and I think we're just as competent and capable of handling anything that comes our way.
Yeah, I mean, here you're having dinner with these people that charge you $950 to have an hour to have dinner with you.
That's right.
And you pick up the check.
That's right.
I remember you were down in El Paso. Was it El Paso, Texas?
I did. I have been in El Paso several times,
Yeah.
and it's quite a trip to El Paso. If you had time, I'd be.
No, I mean, but you pick up certain things as you travel. For example, in El Paso, the border from I'm trying to think what it is. Juarez is right there, and every day, thousands of people come across the border into the States.
Right.
And every day, thousands of people, Mexican people, go home. And you asked that lawyer, you said, how do you know?
How do you know if they come home or don't go home? He said they do.
Yeah,
he said
do.
They leave.
That's their home.
That's their home, and they leave. You know, what was neat about that city was that El Paso, I think, had about 1 million folks living there, and Juarez had 2 million, and it's really one big city,
right,
of 3 million people.
Yeah, and they really get along well, and you know they do things together. Tell me about your favorite case, though. What, big or small? Because I know that you've had all kinds of litigation experience.
Boy, I don't know that I have a favorite. That's a tough question. I tried a case years ago, which is going to be one of the smaller cases I've ever tried. Representing the Humane Society, involving a dog that had been euthanized, and it's a case that has stuck with me forever. The judge was wonderful, the other side was wonderful. We won, but
what did you win? The dog was dead.
Well, we won not having to pay for the dog. Apparently it was our fault for euthanizing the dog, even though they'd brought it to us to euthanize. So that was always one that I found entertaining. It was just a fun case, or a funny case, I suppose. Henry, I represented so many great people, and so you ask about a favorite case, and the answer to that is really the people that I've represented, the people that 10 years later call you up and say, I just want to say thank you for what you did, or a year later when they come back to you and say, you told me that everything would be better a year from now, and it is. Those are the things that I think keep you going as a lawyer. So, you think that it's just the great wins, and we've
Right.
certainly had some that are your favorite cases, but they really aren't. It's the people.
But you do a lot of divorce work too.
I do.
And have you seen things change as the economy changed?
I have. Again, I think as a lawyer, you have to be a little bit skeptical. There are folks that are on hard times, and for those folks, there has to be some relief. There are folks that are using the tough economic conditions here in Michigan as an excuse for not fulfilling their obligations that they agreed to maybe 2 or 3 or 4 years earlier. And I think it's been very hard on judges. I think it's very hard on lawyers, but to distinguish those two categories of people. But certainly, there is less available money to take care of families here in Michigan.
Well, you get people who have houses in Florida or Aspen, Colorado, houses on lakes in Michigan, private planes,
Right.
jets, jet skis and boats and all kinds of toys. And they come to your office and say, we have all this. And then you look on the other side of the ledger and you say, we owe all this.
That's right. Everything is leveraged. There was an article in the New York Times earlier this year that from the beginning of time, folks in divorces used to fight over who was going to keep the house, who
Right.
wanted the house.
Yeah.
Now they can't get rid of it fast enough, and the fight in the divorce case is who's going to get stuck with the house
Because
it's underwater, because they owe more on the house than it's worth. And so it was a very interesting article in the New York Times about that, about a couple in Atlanta, but it's around the country and it's even more prevalent here.
okay, so you represent a mother of 2 kids, okay? Husband's working and may work at Lear or one of these companies, and he's supposed to pay child support, and he's laid off. What happens? Whose move is it next?
Well, until someone files a motion in the court,
Right.
the child support that was in place at the time that the divorce was entered stays in place.
So and then what happens? The guy go to jail?
Well, what he should do is file a petition to reduce his child support, because until he does, the arrearage or the back child support continues to accumulate.
Right.
But that doesn't solve the problem, because even if he doesn't file the motion, someone's got to take care of these children.
Yeah.
And so if I were a judge, and what you see out there is they look at these folks and say, I appreciate that you lost your job at Lear or
Right.
wherever you're working. What are your plans to take care of your children? And maybe you're a highly skilled engineer. In the short term, you might have to go find any job you can find because you have an obligation to take care of your children.
Right.
And if you can't get that high-paying engineering job, you're going to have to get a job that pays you something that allows you to maintain the minimum needs of these children. They have to eat, they have to have clothing, and they have to have shelter.
Well, the point is that the $200 a week that the person was to pay is now, he's unable to pay it. And typically, years past, they'd put these people in jail and say, come up with the money or you're going to be in jail. And somebody would show up with the money.
That's right.
Apparently these days, no one's showing up with the money.
It shows up with the money. In
So-
fact, they say, I'd judge, if you're going to give me 30 days in jail, I'm going to have to take that because I don't have the money.
Are the judges putting people in jail?
I don't think they're putting people in jail just to do it. I think that they're putting people in jail for not paying support if there's a reason to believe that they could be doing better and are not.
Okay, well, you got a 60-year-old woman. Her husband divorces her. He marries a 30-year-old, and he goes on his way. She's getting alimony,
Right?
spousal support. And suddenly he loses his position at General Electric or wherever, or General Motors or Ford or whatever. He was a ranking industrialist. Now what happens? What happens to that woman who's 60 years old?
Well, I think you need to take a step back, though, when you look at this problem. Divorce can't change what would have happened to these folks had they remained married. Had they remained married,
Be the same.
it would be the same problem. They'd be 60 years old, they'd just be a married couple together, he'd have
Right.
lost his job, and they'd have had the same economic problems that they have as a divorced couple.
Except they have another child, a 30-year-old that he
Well,
married.
I didn't say there weren't complications. But
Yeah.
I mean, as a general rule, as lawyers, we can only do so much. We can't print money. We can't get the guy his job back at Lear or whatever company he got laid off from.
Right.
What we can do is look at the judgment, see what he agreed to in that instance. If he owes her money and it's not modifiable, he's going to have to come up with a way to pay it. If he can modify it, he's going to have to prove to the court that he can't do any better.
Well, Mr. Mendelson, David, thank you.
Well, thank you for having me.
We're out of time.
Oh, it's too bad. It went by quickly.
And I'm glad you were able to cast some light on the problems we're facing today.
Well, thank you for having me.
So you got to come back again.
I will.
Okay.
Anytime.
We'll do that. Thanks a lot.
Bye now.
Major funding for Due Process is provided by Meade Lexus of Southfield and Meade Lexus of Lakeside, offering a large selection of new and pre-owned certified premium vehicles.
What if your car didn't come from a factory, but out in the world you actually drive? You can find out at lexus.com/allnewrx.
And by WWJ News Radio 950, keeping you up to date with the latest news, traffic, weather, sports, and business information 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.